Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike, but that's not why I'm here today. Today we're going to talk about the Nikon N1 AW1, which is the world's first mirrorless interchangeable lens camera that's waterproof. In fact, it's waterproof up to 15 meters, it's shockproof up to 2 meters, it's also dust and freeze proof. And the way it does that is by having a waterproof body with a lot of double sealed compartment covers, and it also uses these special lenses. So let me show you one of them. They're different than the typical Nikon 1 series lens in the sense that they have this really deep kind of recess and there's a rubber O-ring on the camera. So these are a little bit tough to get on and off. There currently are two lenses that are waterproof. There's this 10mm 2.8, which is a 27mm equivalent. And then there's this 11 to 27.5 variable aperture lens. This is roughly like a 30 to 75mm equivalent lens. And of course, there's nothing that moves. The lens does not telescope in any way because it's a waterproof lens. So the other thing that's interesting about this camera is that although it's really designed to be a point and shoot, you do have some full manual control. And if I can get this to power up, if you press this button here, and if I turn it down there, the way that you control the function is by rotating it. And this also has in it a compass and GPS and altimeter. You can do wireless functioning with an optional accessory that you plug into the side. Obviously, you wouldn't do that when you're outdoors. It also has a kind of a spirit level to make sure your pictures are level. And this is an over 900,000 dot display, so it's quite clear and sharp indoors. Not so bright outdoors. In fact, it's hard to see detail outdoors. I found that I could just basically see shapes and I had to guess the rest. So you have a lot of functions on this camera. You do have some creative mode options that you can do. You can select the type of kind of film mode that you want to use, whether it's vivid or standard or monochrome and that sort of thing. You have a few extras, like you can use selective color or miniature effect. You can select a few scene modes like backlighting or panorama, and of course the camera will automatically select modes, and you can do this you can do things fully manually, like I said. So those things are all available and it functions pretty well. So I thought this sensor in the camera, which is a 1-inch sensor, was made by Sony, because Sony is the only other company that has 1-inch sensor cameras in their RX series. But it's actually made by a different company, which explains some of the differences that I've seen in the two cameras. So this particular camera, I think its performance, high ISO performance, is not quite as good as the Sonys, even though the Sonys have 20 megapixels, but it's still quite good for a smaller sensor. I'd say images up to 1600 are quite clean, up to 3200 are getting noisy but quite usable, and even at 6400, although you have some tearing of the images and a little more blotching and things, with a little massaging, the images would be fine for posting. Now I shoot pretty much exclusively in JPEG, so if you're going to shoot in RAW, which this camera is capable of doing, you're going to even have better luck at removing noise and fine-tuning your images. So let's look at some images, and I'll tell you some of the pros and cons that I've seen in this camera. Let me get into that screen now. Okay, this first image here is taken at an ISO of 640, no flash, looks pretty good. Here's a flash picture taken at an ISO of 160, and I think it's a little underexposed, especially since it's supposed to recognize faces, so that's pretty easy to kind of correct after the picture's been taken in an editor, which I did here. This is another shot, again showing that more DSLR-like quality of the picture. It looks much more even and not quite as processed as some compact cameras look. Here just shows some of the bokeh. This is at an f3.5. Going off in the distance, you see the slice of cake is blurry. And then we went to a parade. This is Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day, for those people that don't live in the States, is a day that commemorates our veterans, our soldiers. And so they have a big parade in the town that I live in, and so I thought I would take some shots and see how the camera worked. So this is just a shot of a building, just to kind of show any kind of geometric distortions, and it looks okay. I think there's a little bit of barreling in the lens. Here's just another close-up, looks pretty good. Another just shot of the street, looks nice. This is all done in automatic, by the way. Here are some of our statues that we find in town. This one looks pretty good. I think the dynamic range could be a little bit better. There's not a lot of controls on the camera to control such things. Here's a macro shot, looks fine. Here's just some band people that were getting ready to perform. Again, a nice shot, looks more like a DSLR. Here's a shot of the empty street. Not in focus, I'm afraid, not quite sure why. And here's just a maintenance guy picking up cones and things, just to kind of show a different shot. Looks pretty good. And of course, how can you not have a parade without a dog? So we found these nice people with their dog, and they let me take the dog's picture. He looks pretty happy. More parade shots. And since it was so bright out, this is a 1/800th of a second shot. No problem stopping motion. Now here's an interesting shot. Now I think that generally this camera sometimes underexposes. So this shot looks a little underexposed to me. This guy was actually running, but it was at 1/1000th of a second, so he's certainly frozen. But you know, you can clean that up if you want to in post-production like I did here. But again, I think the camera generally did underexpose a little bit. Here again, you see the stop motion action and really a very nice picture. This is at 1/640th of a second. Here's just a close-up of some band people going by. Looks very good, looks DSLR-like to me. And just another shot that I think is a little bit underexposed. And that's it for the shots. So let me get out of this screen. And here we are, we're back again. The one thing that I noticed about the camera that I didn't like is that several times, even though it was only 75 degrees, but the sun was on me, the camera stopped working, shut off, and it said that the interior temperature of the camera was too high. Now think about that. This is an outdoor camera for outdoorsy activities. It was 75 degrees, the sun was shining on it, and it was shutting off because the internal electronics were too hot. I've never had that happen with any camera, even taking them to Florida or into the deserts of Utah. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with this camera, but if that's something that can't be fixed, that would be something that would make me not recommend this camera, because why have an outdoor camera that you can't use in the heat? Other complaints would be the display washes out when you're in direct sunlight. And I think it does underexpose a little bit. Again, those two last problems are not very big problems. But overall, I found that the image quality was quite excellent. I found that the ease of use of the camera was quite good. It feels very solid in your hand and very, very steady. I did some motion picture stuff. It records in 1080i at 60 frames and 1080p at 30 frames and a variety of other frame rates. I'll show you that at the end of this video. The movie looks a little strange to me, and I'm wondering if that was because the sensor was hot, because the internal parts of the camera were getting hot. So I'll show it to you and you can decide yourself. Again, would I recommend this camera? If they fix the problem about the overheating, I would, because I think it's really a great camera. If they can't resolve that problem, I don't know how you're going to use this as a action outdoor camera unless you're just in the water all the time. So let's see what other people think. Anyways, if you get some time, please give my podcast a listen. It's called Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. It's on iTunes and other pod-catching sites. And as always, have a wonderful day. Oh, and of course, probably what everyone wanted to see would be the underwater performance. But it's still pretty cold up here in the upper Midwest. Again, 75 degrees today, but the water's not 75 degrees. So unless someone wants to send me tickets to the Bahamas, I'm afraid we're just going to have to trust Nikon and look at some of their beautiful footage that they shot with the Nikon N1 All-Weather 1. Maybe I'll go to the Bahamas. I don't know. Oh. Anyways, bye.